Welcome to OJAICAST. I'm your host, Christopher Noxon, and we've been diving deep into this year's program. This will be the 79th year of the festival, running from June 5th through the 8th. In previous episodes, we've had some great conversations with composers Marcos Balter and Anea Lockwood, as well as cellist Jay Campbell of the Jack Quartet. This week, we're going to take a peek behind the scenes to discover how the festival is curated and the job of choosing the composers and the pieces being performed. So what better way than going straight to the source? We're going to be speaking with this year's music director, Claire Chase, and the festival's artistic and executive director, Ara Guzelimian. So let's find out how the sausage is made. Claire Chase is a musician, artist, and educator who is the first flutist to be awarded the MacArthur Fellowship, as well as the Avery Fisher Prize for Classical Music from Lincoln Center. There's a wonderful quote from the New York Times that says, "She's the North Star of her instrument's ever-expanding universe." Hi, Claire. Thanks for being here.
Hi, it's such a pleasure.
So first off, I thought we'd get into some music. Pan is part of the Thursday evening concert at the festival, and it really launches with this explosive movement called Death of Pan. Let's take a listen to that. So that is not what I think of when somebody mentions flute music. For those who don't know your work, tell us a little bit about that piece.
Well, it's true. It's not your grandmother's flute recital. Death of Pan is the first movement of this musical drama. It's sort of operatic in scale by the brilliant Marcos Balter, who's one of our featured composers on the festival. It is a ritual for a community ensemble. So an ensemble, multi-generational, all ages, all abilities, all kinds of backgrounds or lack thereof with music and performance. Ensembles made up of the people, made up of anybody who's interested in being on stage with me for this wild experience. And that ensemble is kind of the 21st century Greek chorus in Marcos's and my imaginations of the piece. This opening scene that you just played a bit of is in the Greek myth, and the Greeks spared no gore in their tellings of these stories. Pan has just lost a musical duel with the great god Apollo, and his punishment for having had the audacity to challenge Apollo in the first place and then having lost the duel is to be flayed alive. So we actually begin with a public execution. And Pan is gasping for his life, and he's singing, scatting, screaming that text that you heard me utter, which is in lingua ignota, a language invented by Hildegard of Bingen in the 12th century. And the words are rubians, blood, no me tangere, don't touch me. And Pan says over and over and over again, I do not atone, I do not atone, I do not atone. So it's this very bloody, dramatic opening to the piece.
And so that language is included in your playing. You're popping off the flute to throw words in a really musical way.
Yes, and it's the vocal notation is a separate staff, so I'm reading both flute notation and vocal notation. And Marcos's scores, which are beautifully, intricately detailed, notate every last inhalation and exhalation.
Wow.
So all of that is on the page. And of course, it's supposed to sound like it's scored. It's supposed to sound improvisatory. But every single one of those, everyone is notated with exquisite detail.
Precision and care. Wow. And I understand there's a range of flutes included in that piece. And can you tell me a little bit about those, including maybe Big Bertha?
Yeah. Well, the flute that I play that opening scene on, I should say, is just the good old-fashioned concert flute, the C flute, as we call her. And then I cycle through various flutes in the flute family, beginning with the pan flute, which I didn't know how to play before learning this piece. I found some YouTube videos and also befriended some of the guys in the subway who play the Peruvian panpipes beautifully, and asked them for some tutorials.
Tips?
Yeah, no, and they, I mean, these guys are incredible virtuosos, and they were very generous with their time. So I play the pan flute. I then play the piccolo and the bass flute, and eventually the big girl, Big Bertha, the contrabass flute, which stands about 5.5 feet tall, comes out for a movement called Music of the Spheres.
And you've got Big Bertha with you.
She is here in California with me. Yes, she's not in the studio at the moment. She's resting.
She's resting in
by
bed.
the pool. Yeah.
That's nice. So I hear you're really making use of what's called extended techniques, this breathing and blowing and talking and these quick percussive sounds. It sounds like maybe you've gone even further there. Is there something beyond extended techniques?
Well, the funny thing about the term extended techniques is it it's kind of a limited way of looking at how we develop a language and a vocabulary musically. Once you've extended what you know, well, it's no longer extended, right? So, I mean, I like to think of extending the language of the instrument and of music as just an ongoing process. So once I figure out how to do something, it's no longer an extension, it's just part of the toolkit. And so what comes after is always the question.
How much of that is done in collaboration with the composer, with Marcos?
It's done in intense collaboration. I mean,
Right.
Marcos and I worked we worked on so many of the details of this piece. And the very first phrase, it begins with this gasp where, as I mentioned, every inhalation and exhalation is notated on the page. And so this in slow motion, it's right? Of a certain number of those. And then there's a vocal fry, which is, something we can all do. But you do that into the flute, and it sounds much cooler.
I should say that you've got a flute in your hand. So let's hear a little bit of some of those techniques.
So I'll just slow it down for you. The very first phrase that we heard. So what I'm doing there is inhaling in between each of those played utterances. And the played utterances, which are an E, the pitch E, I'm also singing below that an A. Right?
So you're harmonizing with yourself.
Harmonizing, but you're not really aware of that. It just sounds, my hope is that it just sounds of a piece. It sounds like a desperate, freaked out, I'm being flayed alive gesture. And the last one is a little pizzicato. I mean, violins do that all the time, but we flutes can do that too.
What? I mean, get ready, Ojai. Come on. I'm just like, I'm almost crying here, and, you're just dashing that off. Well, anyway, that's amazing. Thank you. So this year we're doing the world premiere of 2 pieces, I understand, from Terry Riley, Pulsefield 2 and 3. That's going to conclude on Sunday evening at 5:30. How did that come about? How did we get 2 Terry Riley pieces?
How incredibly lucky are we, right?
Yeah.
Well, the truth is that the Pulsefield 3 arrived as this unexpected gift. I was in Japan with Terry a month or so ago to play his piece, excerpts from his piece, The Holy Liftoff, and to play some duo shows with him. We did some improvised shows together. And he, with a twinkle in his eye, he always has a twinkle in his eye, he said, "Oh, Claire, I got something new for you. Pull out your phone." And he WhatsApped me this gorgeous graphic score called Pulsefield 3.
Wow.
And it's a variation on a continuation of Pulsefield 1 and 2, which existed. We haven't yet premiered Pulsefield 2, so that also will be a premiere. But it involves a central eye figure, like a human eye or an animal eye, as the jumping off point for all kinds of iterative improvisations and co-creation. He's really into the idea of a village of people making a piece and an experience together with this graphic material as a playpen and as kind of a DIY toolkit. So he messaged me this score and he said, you think you might play this? And I was like, I think I'm about to send a message to my friend Ara at the Ojai Music Festival and say, yes, we're going to play this.
Yeah, we're going to play this.
I think I've got the folks. And in fact, we are gathering just about everybody who's participating in the festival on stage to give birth to this brand new piece and gift. It was a gift. It came from love. It came from a spontaneous offering, not from some structural decision or a commission contract. This is music and friendship at its purest.
Committee free.
Yes.
Oh, this sounds fantastic. I cannot wait. Let's hear a little bit of the umbrella project, Holy Liftoff. Give us a sense of what we're in for.
So the Holy Liftoff is it's a sprawling, ambitious, never-ending project of Terry's. He began it as a series of sketches, graphic scores that he sent me in the pandemic. And it was inspired by a conversation he and I had that was sort of toward the end of lockdown about what we were doing with our time and what we were listening to. And he asked me, what was occupying my time. And I said, well, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I've been fanatically arranging with multiple flutes, especially low flutes, Bach chorales, beloved Bach chorales, from the St. Matthew Passion. And that's the music that I wanted to hear. It's the music I wanted to play. And I use them as just kind of etudes to work on voicing and also work on intonation and this kind of geeky stuff. These were never meant, and they still aren't meant for any kind of public consumption, but I shared them with Terry. And he said, we're having mind meld. This is a telepathic moment because I've been obsessed with chorales too. And I've been listening to a lot of the old stuff. And he said, I've got an idea in mind for a chorale. 2 days later, he sends me this gorgeous graphic score that has a 16-bar in 5/2 time chorale called the Holy Liftoff Chorale. And he said, just see what this sounds like with your flutes. And so I made a little scratch arrangement of it with high and low flutes and sent it back to him. And he loved it. And he said, okay, I think we have the beginnings of a piece. And from there, for the next 4 years, material just poured out of him.
Wow.
And so the Holy Liftoff has been, I say never ending because, even when Terry's no longer here and I'm no longer here, this piece is going to keep generating. Every performance will be utterly different. There's a lot of improvisation and arrangement and realization involved. I mean, in a very Baroque way. So the performers have considerable leeway to shape the performances very differently each time. And it's the kind of thing that, will just continue to be a generous, life-giving, generative project. Very much Terry's spirit.
Incredible. So I'm super curious about the graphic score part of this. It's a hybrid of traditional notation, and I've seen some of these illustrations. They're gorgeous. I mean, they're really full of character and life and offhanded kind of imagination. But like, how do you go from that to the music that we're hearing in the space?
It is a process, and to use Terry's phrase, it takes a village. It's a community endeavor, and in this case, a lot of musicians were involved, and Terry and I engaged this brilliant young New York-based composer named Samuel Bermeher to make some orchestrations and arrangements, and more than arrangements, realizations, sort of co-creations of this material for a specific instrumentation.
Are there like string and flute parts?
Yeah, and it's the Holy Liftoff is an open score. So yes, I'm doing it on high and low flutes and with a string quartet. That was a decision that I made purely because I had to make a decision
right.
about what forces we were going to use to premiere this thing. And I've always wanted to do a project with Jack Quartet. They're dear friends, and they were game. And so we engaged Sam to put together a concert version of this material. I've also done versions of this material with groups of musicians who are just assembled on the spot, wacky instrumentations. I did it with a keyboard ensemble and a couple of flutes. So the music lends itself to a very prepared and manicured and orchestrated iteration. It also, importantly, lends itself to a ragtag, whoever shows up, whatever registers, whatever instruments, whatever parts are covered or not. Let's make a piece.
Let's go.
And every possible iteration in between. I mean, that's why it's just so generous and porous and effortlessly inclusive.
I can't wait to hear that live. Another piece you're going to be performing from your Density 2036 project is by the composer Lisa Lim. This is called Sex Magic, and that's going to be on Friday, June 6th at 3:30. Let's listen to a bit of Sex Magic. So that's a movement called Oracle's One Salutations to the Cowrie Shells. Tell us about Sex Magic.
Sex Magic is a ritual concert experience for Big Bertha, the contrabass flute, and what Lisa, the composer, calls an installation of kinetic percussion. And so what that means is that the percussion is played by me, by the performer, but importantly by Bertha, the instrument. And the way that works is that, for instance, the keys of the instrument are attached to microphones, little transducers that are attached to drums, to bongos, a high and low bongo, a ginormous bass drum. And so when I move one of my fingers, that actually activates a percussion section behind me.
Whoa.
And in addition to that, I also play a kick drum, with my foot, sort of the traditional way.
Yeah.
But what results is this kind of one-woman band where all of the percussive sounds are generated by, yes, my body, but they're also generated by the body of the instrument. And this is very much a part of Lisa's embodied knowledge, research, and practice. And, a lot of people theorize about this. Lisa does it.
Wow.
And she does it with this exquisitely beautiful and lyrical and rad, sexy music.
So you're triggering all these instruments like a one-person band standing around in a village square.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
Involves a little more complicated tech than the village square, granny cart setup. But
No monkey with an organ.
That's going to be Density 2030.
Oh, awesome. So I understand you had a childhood dream of becoming a professional baseball player. Is this true?
Yeah, I was really serious about it. I mean, I grew up in North San Diego County, and I was obsessed with baseball. It was my first love before the flute.
Amazing.
The flute was the backup plan.
I'm sure. What position and when did you stop?
Second base and center field.
All right.
And I started when I was 8. I wanted to start when I was 6, but I tried out for the Encinitas Little League team when I was 8. I was the only girl in the league. And I had a big blonde ponytail that I
Spectacular.
would hide in my baseball cap. And I was totally obsessed. I mean, baseball was my life for 4 years. And I think I was pretty good. I was at the level of the boys when I was 8 and 9 years old, and maybe in the beginning of the 10th year. And then they got really strong and really fast. And
stupid boys.
And I thought, I'll just train harder. I'll just run more. I'll just work harder, and I'll be able to keep up. And so I ended my baseball career in like a little bit of humiliation.
Aw, well, it's the MLB's loss, and it's our gain. So I'd love to ask Ara Guzelimian to join our conversation and understand a bit more about how you two have worked together. Ara was the artistic director of the Ojai Music Festival from 92 to 97, and he returned in 2020 in the role of artistic director and executive director. Ara, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Of course. You've spoken in the past about how the eclectic nature of the festival is really by design, and that a big part of that is, the fact that you're picking a different music director every year. Tell us a little bit more about how you do that, how we're lucky enough to have Claire here. It seems like an incredibly complicated and intricate dance that you're doing every year. How does that change the program, and what goes into that decision?
I think it just changes the joyousness of the dance from year to year. It's pretty exhilarating. It's part of to me, the genius of the design of the Ojai Festival. And I inherited that design, which is the real curatorial model, working with an artist you admire and saying, okay, here is a full palette of possibilities in front of you. And maybe one of the world's most open and receptive audiences. What would you like to do that you haven't been able to do before? And that's a pretty great starting point. And then the other thing I'm very fond of saying from year to year is, if you think you figured us out from last year, just wait.
Yeah, I'm getting the sense that this is not going to be anything like previous years. With Claire, I understand that both of you had a ton of ideas, right? Like, you came into this with a lot more than could possibly fit in 4 days. How do you narrow it down?
Well, Claire hasn't heard me say this, but I've said it to others. I said, we began with about 18 festivals worth, and we've ended up happily at about 1 1/4 festivals worth.
When do we get the extended cut?
I think it will be a very rich and fulfilling meal. I don't think there'll be snacks needed afterwards.
But how do you narrow it down? I mean, is it just a process of sort of winnowing? And I'm just curious.
It's nonlinear, right? Yes, there's winnowing, there's culling, there's a ton of back and forth. And of course, Ara has seen not just the festivals that have been done in this iteration of your artistic directorship, but you have been involved in the history of this place. And so you've seen ideas that have worked and haven't worked. And that is this historical knowledge that is just so helpful and so grounding as I was trying to sift through, an exuberant amount of possibilities, but far too many to fit into 4 days. And I think the one defining, and there are many defining things about Ojai, but the one really unique thing about this festival is that so much of this audience goes to everything from Thursday to Sunday. And that is not your typical festival experience.
Yeah.
You generally curate a festival with the idea that folks are going to dip in and out of this. And that, of course, is very much a part of some people's Ojai experience. But when I realized, and it was quite early in the process, I realized that really was not an extra, not just a special thing. That actually is like part of the core magic of this place. And it's a defining characteristic. And, that really shaped my thinking and our thinking together about how to curate not just programs and artists, but how to curate an experience that threads Thursday evening.
That has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right. A full narrative.
Small venues, large venues, artists you've never heard of before, artists who are, at the end of their lives and careers who you think you know everything about, like Terry Riley, and watch out, everybody's in for a surprise, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that really grounded me.
And I would add that Claire, even more so than other music directors, puts huge value in bringing together a community of artists, and this sense of the community that's created for the festival. Then there's the most inspiring sort of series of tennis matches as, the ball goes back and forth over the net. And, the artists are inspired by the presence of another artist or another piece or something they've always wanted to do. And then these threads begin to emerge that really grow out of the people who are gathered.
Yeah. So, Ara, are you also kind of the defender or the thinker around this location? I mean, this is your baby, and I just wonder, when you're working with these music directors, what kind of factors are you considering in terms of the audience and the locations, and what are you trying to protect?
I'm not sure I'm actually trying to protect. I'm trying to stimulate the richest possible immersive experience. Claire mentioned this more holistic approach that many in the audience take. And if you're going from this event in the morning to this event in the afternoon, or a film or a talk with a composer, and this event in the evening, what's the thread that's emerging? What's the connective piece? Mm-hmm. And I would also say two particular things among many in working for Claire. She's a native Californian, so she has a kind of deeply rooted response to this particular landscape. And she has performed at the Ojai Festival 3 times, beginning 10 years ago. So she has her own experience on stage. But to her eternal credit, she came and attended the festival last year as an audience member.
Yeah, I was going to ask how that changed your decision making about as a music director. What kind of influence does that have?
It changed everything, because I thought that I understood the Ojai Music Festival from having played 3 summers in a row, and I understood dimensions of it. But the truth is that when you're performing, you're running on fumes. You bite off way more than you can chew, and then you do this high wire act that's also fed by all the other amazing people around you who are doing a high wire act. And you're not thinking about balance. You're not thinking about time off. There isn't any. You're thinking about how do I stay up through this next exhilarating experience? And those beautiful energies just feed on each other. It's very different as a listener. I mean, yes, you have that ecstatic experience. We hope that audiences have that ecstatic experience when they're listening, but you're not running on fumes so much. You want time to reflect, and you also. I found myself, after hearing Schoenberg Chamber Symphony, wanting to be in silence.
Some rest.
And hearing Mitsuko play Mozart, I didn't want to go to a late night concert. And so one of the first things I was pushing for was a late night concert every night. I wanted to do an 11 p.m. concert. And Ara was a little bit like, oh, well, the plate is already very, very full. This is already a feast.
We go to sleep earlier around here, just so you know.
Yeah. And I, after an incredible experience listening to Mahler Chamber Orchestra and Mitsuko, I was like, I am so fed, and what my soul needs right now is silence. And so having that experience as a listener, it changed everything for me, and it attuned me to listening. And I think from that place, we began to have conversations about listening to this place itself, to the flora and fauna and the bird species, all the things that are particular to this place. And we wanted to build in time and space, and also site-specific experiences to listen very, very closely to that. And so, that was sort of
one of those threads that runs
and one of the
through.
things that emerged from my listening experience.
Now, are you both native Californians? Is that what I understand?
I'm close to.
Close to.
I began living here when I was 9 years old, so this is the place that feels like home to me in a very profound way.
Yeah. All right, you're in this unique position of wearing the two hats of being artistic director and executive director. And I imagine that means you need to look after all the logistics and the budget and the festival as an event. And then you've got what you're doing here, which is this grand artistic vision. And I just wonder if that presents challenges.
Let's just say it's multidimensional, but if you think of it as, in the end, building community in multiple ways and multiple dimensions, then it does have a coherence. I've been coming to Ojai with my family since I was in my early teens, and my very first time at the Ojai Festival was when I was in college at UCLA, coming as a member of a chorus that sang at the Ojai Festival.
Amazing.
So these roots run very deep here.
Amazing. So I understand that in this last couple of weeks, we got this incredible news that Susie Ibarra's piece, Sky Islands, which she's going to be doing here, just won the Pulitzer Prize for music. Let's listen to a little bit of that and then talk a bit about it. That was Sky Islands, the Susie Ibarra piece. That's going to be part of the Sunday morning concert at 10:30. Come listen to the Pulitzer Prize winning piece. What can you tell us about Sky Islands?
Well, Susie is a force of nature. She's a Renaissance woman.
Right.
And I cannot think of an artist of our times who's more deserving of this recognition. We're just absolutely thrilled for her.
Yeah.
And I was a part of the development and the premiere of Sky Islands. It's a joyous project. The Sky Islands refers to these high mountains that essentially are islands in the northern Luzon area of the Philippines. And in this area, there are hundreds of species that exist nowhere else in the world. And so Susie spent a lot of time researching this area, and as an ensemble, we also spent a lot of time imagining into the many musics of these species, tiny animals, insects, birds, serpents, creatures that don't exist anywhere else in the world and whose musics don't exist anywhere else in the world. And this incredibly rich, biodiverse, and also fragile and vulnerable area that is so exuberantly full of these many musics. And so we spent a lot of time listening to these creatures, and also importantly imagining them and imagining how we could bring that richness to life. So it's a piece that brings our attention to the endangered species and to the incredible vulnerability of this area and so many areas like it around the world. And it does that by celebrating and uplifting and sponsoring and restoring, in the words of Gwendolyn Brooks, these animals and this music that exists nowhere else.
There are many, many musics. Wow, I can't wait to hear the many musics of those little creatures. We're also going to have another Susie Ibarra piece on Saturday morning at 8 for the morning meditation. This is a free concert in a beautiful setting. Can you tell us any more?
Yeah, so we're going to do an arrangement of a piece that Susie wrote for me called Sunbird. And the sunbird is a Filipino bird, endemic to the Philippines. And it's this little tiny creature that has this extraordinary and loud song. I do a version of it for many flutes. I do a solo version of it sometimes. Sometimes I do it with students. It's a wonderful piece to do in community with flutists of all ages and abilities. And for this iteration, we're doing it with 3 of the phenomenal wind players that we are privileged to have on the festival this year: Michael Matsuno, flutist; Joshua Rubin, clarinetist; and Marta Tisenga, saxophonist.
Incredible. I know we're going to be doing that at the Ojai Meadows Preserve, which, if you know this area, is really spectacular. These tall eucalyptus trees. So let's take a listen to Sunbird. So that's Susie Ibarra's Sunbird. When we spoke with cellist Jay Campbell, he said one of the things he appreciates so much about this festival is that the audience here is attuned, as Ara said, to kind of expect really adventurous programming. I want to ask you, Ara, what's your advice for people who haven't had a lot of experience with more challenging or adventurous music?
I think it's drop expectation. And I'm a deep, deep believer that if you come to something with open mind, open heart, open ears, you will receive. And then the most important thing is react to it as honestly as humanly possible. Don't think there's some sort of good housekeeping approved reaction to this. Our friend Peter Sellers, the stage director, said in a talk he gave years ago, and it stuck with me, in a world and a life that's less and less private, our reaction to the arts is one of the few completely private things left to us. We can say whatever received nonsense we want to say about a play we've seen, a dance we've seen, a piece of art, or music we've heard. But as Peter said, when our head hits the pillow and the lights go out, we actually think of it what we thought. And so we may as well just start with that. And then I think that openness leads to the best imaginable receptivity. So that's my most fervent hope for the ideal listener.
Yeah, I tell you, before the festival, I had very little experience with experimental music, and I admit there are times that are kind of scratch your head moments. But then, you wait it out, and there's these unbelievable moments of transcendence. And when I tell people to come, I say to them that this is really an event that rewards patience, that the more you can sit and just wait for it, it's going to come. Like you're going to get your mind blown. So anyway, that's how I have thought of it. For both of you, when you're working together and you're selecting these pieces for each concert, what are some of the considerations that you're making? I mean, I know you were talking about the musicians themselves and the combination of people in the community and the tone. And I imagine that the instrumentation is really important. Do you try to create a mood for, say, the morning versus the evenings?
Yeah, there's definitely a mood consideration. I think one of my guiding principles, and we never actually talked about this, but among many other things, I don't know that we ever really needed to, because I believe it was shared from the beginning, is I want to create programs that wouldn't happen anywhere else. I have no interest in making a program that we then pick up and do somewhere else. I mean, that very well may happen, but I don't want that to be a limiting factor at all. And so, thinking about, say, for instance, this Friday evening program where we have this phenomenal cello ensemble. We have 10 cellists coming together to do this Julius Eastman piece.
10 cellos.
And we have 8 cellists in the Gubaidulina, 7, sorry, in the Gubaidulina. This is not a program. First of all, it's totally impractical. Can you imagine that being a touring program? You've got 7 cellos, 8 cellos, then you've got a chorus of 14 flutes and the Jack Quartet. And then we have Leilahua Lanzalotti open with this absolutely exquisite kind of anthem. This is something that would only happen in Ojai. And there are all kinds of thematic reasons Ara and I put those pieces together. But I think the overarching thing for me is that this can only happen here at Ojai. And it probably will only happen once. And that's just thrilling.
Yeah, on Saturday morning, there's a string quartet concert. And Saturday evening, there is a flute and piano and percussion concert. All of the musicians weave in and out of every single concert. So the juxtaposition opens up very new worlds of possibilities.
And among notated and improvised musics and everything in between, too. So often we hear improvised music on its own festival or in its own program,
right,
or, packaged as such. And in this festival, I don't think you'll be able to tell from piece to piece and from performance to performance, within performances, what is being created on the spot and what has been notated. And it doesn't matter. Yeah. Many of these artists are so multilingual in their approaches.
Yeah.
And that's been really fun to play with, too, thinking about unexpected combinations and collaborations of people and experiences.
A lot of blends, no segregation or silos here, people. I'd love to hear also, as you sort of look at this program and what we're in for, what are you each personally looking forward to the most? I know that's going to be a hard question, but...
That's the choose your favorite child question.
If I had to pick, I would say the most dangerous, the most unknown moment is when we get everybody on stage for the world premiere of Pulsefield 3.
Yeah.
And that beautiful danger is, I just live for that.
Right.
It's terrifying. It's exhilarating.
A lot can go wrong. A lot can go right.
And I just can't wait to see. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm positive that whatever happens in the dress rehearsal is going to be utterly different than what happens in the concert. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm scared.
Great.
And I know this answer is really dodging your question, but I think the beautiful arc of the festival, which begins with a piece called Alone, which is a solo flute piece and very meditative, reflective with flute and very beautiful and kind of angelic sounding wine glasses played on stage, and ending with a brand new piece by a composer on the eve of his 90th birthday is such a beautiful arc, and it ends with this huge expression of optimism. So I think I didn't quite answer your question, but I love the arc of where we begin and where we end.
I could use that big dose of optimism myself anyway. So finally, we're asking everyone we're talking to on the podcast to suggest and maybe bring along a piece of music that you happen to be listening to at the moment or that you've found inspiring. Claire, what have you brought for us?
Well, I brought you two things.
Great.
I brought you a poem.
All right.
And we've included this in the opening comments of the festival. But I wanted to read it. It's very short. And for me, it encompasses a lot of what we're trying to incite and share with this festival. It's by Gwendolyn Brooks, and it's called Art. Art can survive the last bugle of the last bureaucrat, can survive the inarticulate choirs of maketeers, the stolid and stately places, all flabby gallantries, all that will fall. Lending our strength to keep art breathing, we doubly extend, refine, we clarify, leading ourselves, the halt, the harried, through the icy carols and bayonets of this hour, the divisions, vanities, the bent flowers of this hour. We hail what heals and sponsors and restores.
Okay. Well, follow that up, Ara. No, I'm just kidding. But Ara, do you have anything you've been listening to, like even today, that you'd like to share with us?
Well, the honest answer, and of course I can never settle on one thing, so you'll have to forgive me. I had some quiet time to myself this morning, and what I listened to was some of the most beautiful and deeply personal piano music I know, which is Janacek's On the Overgrown Path, piano music from the early 20th century. And then I have a complete weak spot for the great Malian blues player and singer Ali Farka Touré. So those were the two things that I listened to in my most private time this morning. So I think that's my most honest answer.
Gorgeous. Let's hear a little bit of that. Okay, so now we're going from Malian blues back over to Claire. You said you had a piece of music in addition to the poetry?
Yeah, I'd love to share this special rendition of a piece called Horse Sings from Cloud by Pauline Oliveros, played in this recording by Pauline Oliveros. She plays the accordion and sings, and the piece is a piece that we'll do on the festival, another site-specific performance at the Ojai Meadow. And the score itself consists of just two instructions, and they are sing or play a tone. When the desire to change the tone arises, don't change the tone. When the desire to change the tone subsides, change the tone. So this is Pauline playing Horse Sings from Cloud.
So beautiful. Well, that should finish it for today. Thank you so much, Claire and Ara, for being here, and thank you for everything you're doing for this festival. To finish up, do you have any tips for festival newcomers, people who haven't been here before?
Come and just bask in it. Allow yourself to be immersed and talk to everybody around you.
Yeah, come say hi. Come say hi to the musicians.
Yeah, that's one of the great things, is that they're just standing around and they're all eager to talk. It's kind of incredible. All right, thank you both.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Claire Chase, this year's music director at the Ojai Music Festival, and to Ara Guzelimian, the festival's artistic and executive director. I loved learning about how they put it all together and to learn more about the premieres coming this year, and especially liked hearing about Claire's arsenal of instruments, especially that fearsome big Bertha. So we hope to see you in Ojai, June 5th through the 8th. OJAICAST was produced by Will Thomas for the Ojai Music Festival. Visit ojaifestival.org for more information on the program, tickets, and please consider donating to the festival to keep innovative music coming to the Ojai Valley. You can find me on Instagram at Noxon Art or online at ChristopherNoxonArt.com.